Hey folks, I'm Tom Vassell.
Jason Levine.
Today we're taking a look at a game called Ave Roma. Now, Ave Roma is a game about, what are you trying to do in this game? Roma's flourishing and you are trying to get quests and, okay, that's right, you're building buildings, getting patrons.
Yes.
You are essentially trying to score points in a variety of ways through a worker placement game where the workers matter.
Yes.
Each worker is going to have a different number, and in this game, there's a lot of number stuff in it. You'll see. There's a lot of pieces too. Here they are. The game comes with a round board that actually has two sides. I'm showing you what I think is the better looking side. Now in this game you're going to be getting various points. That's how you win. And I'm not going to go over every single rule, but I want to kind of give you an overview. Each player is going to have a player board. And these player boards are very similar except the resources. You're going to keep track of 6 different resources on your player board, and they're going to cost different amounts. So here you can see wood is 3, while on this board wood is 1. On this board here the horses are 1. On this board the horses are 2. So they're going to be different amounts, and each player is going to start with 2 and two selected resources and the rest. As the game is going by, you're going to be collecting these resources, and if you ever get 3 resources and you get an extra one of that resource, then that comes over here in another resource called surplus. Surplus is kind of like an extra resource, and some things will just directly give you surplus, but for the most part, you get surplus every time you go above 3 in any of these other resources. Players are going to be getting points from this board. Over on the bottom here, you're going to be keeping track here of how much you're working with the patricians or the different, famous people. And the farther over this is, the more points you'll get. And if you keep bumping it over after you get all the way to the end, you'll get 2 points. There are also various cards in the game that will give you points straight up, like this one here is worth 5 points. But many of the points are from the middle here. Now you'll notice that there's different tracks here next to these resource cards. And as the game goes by, this brown cube is going to be moving up. And players are going to be putting their own cubes here on the side of the board. There's different cards that when played are going to allow those cubes to move up. At the end of the game, players are going to get points based on how high they are on the track, although they can never be higher than the brown cube. So let's say we're playing a 2 to 3 player game. If you reach the number 4 position, you're going to get 14 points. If you get all the way to the top, you get 30. But that would mean both the brown cube and you would need to get to the top. At the end of the game, let's say red is here. They would be knocked all the way down to where brown is. And the points also will change somewhat based if it's a 4 to 5 player game. So how does the game work? Each round of the game, players are going to be placing workers on the board. Each player will start, the first round, players are going to start with 1 through 5 workers here. These are these pillars, and you're going to be taking turns placing these on the board. And there are various spots where you can place them on the board. For example, you can place them here, and you'll notice each spot on the board has some spots that you can only play if you're playing with 3, 4, or 5 players. But when you place here, you're going to get money equal to 2 times the number you placed there. What? That means 5s are the best, right? Well, not quite. Let's say I want to go to this area here and take one of these cards. To take these cards, I'm going to need to pay various resources. So for example, here I would need to pay 4 surplus and 1 grain. Here I would need to pay 2 surplus and 1 red resource. But to go to these spots, you're going to need to, here I can put any number, 1 through 5. Here 1 through 4, 1 through 3, 1 to 2, and only 1. So over here, the 1 is the best number because it can claim any card, while the 5 can only be used in the last spot. So having the different numbered things is going to help you. So these are, essentially this is like war, and most of these are going to be used to move your cubes up. There's another action that you can play to use these cards after you've procured them to move your cubes up on those different tracks, although some of the cards here are simply going to give you points. There are also buildings over here. These buildings are going to give you mostly points. Sometimes they let you move your cubes up on the track, and it's the same thing. You can see only the 1 can be placed here, while the 1 through 5 can be placed here. And they also cost various amounts of resources. If you build 2 buildings that are the same name, so for example here we have the Concordia. These are the plans for Concordia. Here's the actual building. You will get some bonuses, an extra victory point and an extra resource. The war things are the same way. As you collect these, you're going to be looking at the names at the top. And if you collect, for example here, Vercingtorix, if you collect the second one, you're going to get gold. If you collect the third one in the set, you'll get a surplus resource. If you collect the fourth one, you get points. If you collect the fifth one, you get to move one of your cubes up. And so getting more of the same name over here is going to give you bonuses. The last places that players are going to be placing their cards, well, there's the second last, is going with these cards in the middle. Each of these cards corresponds to a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when you place a worker in one of these three spots here, it's going to correspond to that actual card. So if I go to this place here, and let's say I put the 2 worker here, I'm going to get the 4 resources shown on the 2 card. So this gives me 2 wood, a horse, and a coal. Great. If I go to this spot, I can sell resources that I have for the price that they're worth to me, which is going to be different per player. And I can also buy resources, but I can only buy resources that are shown on the card. So here I can only buy wood, horses, and ore. And if I go over here, I can take half of the resources on the card. So I can pick the top 2 or the bottom 2. Plus I can take one more resource on the card. And this is where, or I can discard the cards that I have or use the cards I have to move the cubes up next to these. Now every time you use a card in any of these 3 spots, that card is moved up. The next time someone uses this card, this exact same card, they have to pay 2 coins. It makes the brown cube move up 1, and the card is discarded, and a new card is put into its place at the bottom. This is a timer for the game. When these cards run out, well actually when any set of cards runs out, but it's going to likely be these, when they run out, the game is going to be over. The last place players can place their workers is down here. Now, there is a turn order for this game. You'll see this here, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But when you place here, whatever number you place here, that's how far you will move this around this kind of rondelle. Each space that you pass over, you have to pay the resources of that spot. So here I would have to pay 2. If I move this 4, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, I'd have to pay 2 coins, a black resource, a green resource, and a surplus. However, I pass this marker here. That is what allows me to move this on this track here, which is going to be worth points at the end of the game. The first 5 spots, when I move them to these, open up these slots here to put patricians. Patricians are another card that can be gotten. They're here at the top of the board, and you can, again, place 1 through 5 here and only 1 here. Patricians are going to cost a certain number of resources. They're usually very expensive. They cost money. But they might give an immediate benefit, but what they're often going to do is they're going to give some sort of bonus to one of your future actions. For example, this one here. When you move around that rondelle I just showed you, you don't have to pay surplus every time you pass it from now on. This guy here, when you take another senator, you have to pay 2 less coins from now on. So they give you an end game benefit. So this one, for example, gives you 1 point for every red card you have at the end of the game. And they give you a bonus to one of your actions. So choosing the right senator is going to help your game go better. And that's it, except at the end of a round, you're going to be looking at turn order. Now, turn order is going to be marked here, and it's kind of random on the first turn, but after that, players are going to be taking their workers back. When you take workers back, you will grab, in reverse order, you will grab all the workers from one section until you have 5. You can't go over 5. So if I already have 3 workers, I could only grab 2 of the workers from this section. And you're trying to get a different mix of numbers because all 5s might be great, give you a lot of money, but you won't be able to place in many spots on the board. And so players are going to take turns. After everyone has taken all these, you will add together the numbers, and whoever has the lowest number will go first, and whoever has the highest number will go last, and you start the next turn. The game also comes with 5 mini expansions. We have not played with them. Each of them comes with their own rules and in a bag of extra things to add, and that's how you play. Okay, before we get into this game too much, I gotta say, companies who do Kickstarters, you gotta kind of calm down sometimes. Because this game was a Kickstarter. There's Kickstarter components that were changed that were not mentioned in the rules. There were Kickstarter cards that were included that are not mentioned in the rules. They changed things. Like they changed the white discs to columns and stuff. And that's not a terrible thing. I'm all for improvements, but when you don't mention in the rules, it's very confusing. They also have 5 mini expansions in here, which I have not touched because I think the basic game has a ton of stuff going on already. And it feels like those were just all stretch goals, more things to throw in. Maybe they're fantastic, maybe they're fine, I don't know. But base game itself, it's a worker placement game.
Yes, and it's a unique worker placement game, as you just showed, where depending what number worker you have, it gives you one of 5 different areas that you're going for in each of the things, or multiplying the amount of money. And I found that very refreshing and very different, that it's not just a worker, it's a worker with a value, and the value points to what you're doing with that worker. I thought it was a great mechanic and a unique thing that I haven't seen.
I was pretty impressed by it because I like how there's a 1 through 5, and at first you're like, oh, the 5 is amazing, he gets you 10 gold. Yeah, but the 1 can build any card on the board.
While the 5 could only build the last card in it.
In each row. And then sometimes you just want, you're like, oh, I got a 3. Oh, but I needed a 4. You want to get like the resource at the certain card. Now the board comes with 2 sides. I think the one side is a little easier to read than the others. But one thing where the game can bog down is there is a ton of information out there.
Yes.
There is all these buildings. Some of the buildings have special abilities, not too many, but there's people. Then there's all the patrons, and they definitely have special abilities, and you definitely want to know what they are.
Because those senators are powerful.
So there's a lot of symbols that you're looking up, and explaining it to new people is a lot of work because there's so many places to put people. It's a tight game, for sure.
Yes.
But there's a lot going on, okay? This is a game that new players just assume you won't do that well, okay? Because it's going to take a while to learn it, and you'll have to play it a few times to figure out exactly how everything works. Another thing I think about the game is interesting is that whole take the workers back. I have not seen that before.
Yes, taking the workers back was great. If you go last, you take them back, and what I did is I kept taking back lots of 5s because I wanted lots of money, because you needed money for the senators. So I kept taking back the pile that had as many 5s as possible, and then I kept going last to do that. But then I realized that I wasn't getting the low numbers to be able to do those things that you only could do with a 1 or a 2. So you have to balance out. You can't just take the biggest thing every time, and you really need to balance it out.
And it's kind of cool because you can see the board. The board is not changing for the next setup, and you'll be like, oh, I really want that building there, so I need a 2 to make sure I can get that, or a 1.
Yes.
So 2 is probably better than a 1. I'll take a 2. Or I want those resources, and that's at the 4 spot. I definitely need a 4. Now, should I grab 1, or should I grab a handful now? And then also, if I take more low numbers, I'll go first in the round, which is not a bad thing. Because first matters because you're going first multiple times in that round.
Yes, and you can take the card before someone else can take a card, or you could get a resource and knock the card out of resources and pull the card into your hand. You could do things that other people can't do if they go later in the turn.
Now, there's a few things I would have cut. Like if I was developing this game, there's like, when you get 2 cards that have half a disc, you get a free resource. And, sometimes every time you get something, there's like, oh, I got these 2 buildings, they match.
And it gives me a bonus.
Cool, but because the cards are so small and there's so much information all over the place, you're constantly having to like, oh, what is going on here? And as people buy stuff, the board is changing and cards go. And you mustn't, here's a strategy tip for new players, do not ignore your cubes in the middle. They're worth a lot of points.
Yes.
All right? So you want to get the buildings that allow you to increase us up there. And that's an interesting concept. I don't think a lot of this game is new, right? There's a rondel in the middle. We've seen that before. Getting certain points, there's a patron chart. We've seen that before. Having spots you can put people that give you special abilities. We've seen that. I think this whole game is revolving around the numbered workers and pulling them off. That's the unique thing about this game, and I think it works.
I do too. I thought it worked very well. In terms of the actual things that you're placing down and what's balanced and what's not balanced, I felt that the red cards, which are the war cards, where you can put those cubes in the middle and also get a lot of points, I felt that those were the strongest cards in the game. And are they balanced compared to the senators and compared to the black cards and compared to just picking up lots of resources the whole game?
There's just so much going on. It's hard to tell. There's so many things you can do. You definitely want to play this with an analysis paralysis type of person, because they're going to slow down. There's just so many options. Now, as time goes by, your options get shorter, and you will eventually have times where you're like, oh, I can't even put this worker out. Although I do like that you can then train the worker.
You could train the worker for the next round.
And training it, which is not the greatest thing, but it means next round that person's at minimum a plus or minus 1.
Yes.
Which is going to give you a lot more wider range of where to put them.
Good flexibility.
And in fact, it's an interesting strategy, which I haven't tried yet, is putting a 3 on one of those or a 2, and then like adding 3 to that 2's value, throw it there, get the 10 money, and that stops the person from grabbing because there's a 2 on the money instead of a 5.
Yes.
So I don't know. Like I said, we didn't play with all these mini expansions. Maybe they add more to the experience. I just don't see that many more pieces would be that exciting. It's a heavier style game. And Jason says it's not heavy, but that's because he plays too many heavy games. This is a lot. There's a lot going on here to get into. This is not a game that you will grasp instantly. I like it. What would you give it as an awesomeness rating?
Well, I'm going to give it an awesomeness rating of 7. I like the game a lot. I love the idea of workers that change value and that the values mean something. I really like that. I'm just not sure how balanced it is because it felt like certain things were much better than other things. I mean, it might take more plays to see if there's more balance in the game, but I'm going to give it a 7 because just for the workers is so unique.
All right, I was going to give it a 7 too. I think it's slightly more convoluted than I might want, but I do like the concept a lot. I like the workers. I like how the resources work. I like the asymmetrical boards. Each player they're paying different costs for the different goods, and that's fair. It's not like any one good's better than any other good, right? So, but it makes you're not necessarily competing for the same stuff, which is kind of intriguing. And sometimes I'll buy something because it's cheap. Well, for Jason, it sells for 3. That's a really big deal. It's a game that I think will reward multiple plays. I have not played it with the full complement of 5 players. I don't think I would. It feels like it would be too many people in a game, but still pretty impressed with it. That's Ave Roma.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.